More developments this week in the new federal case against Donald Trump. The former president rejected his lawyer's advice to negotiate a settlement in the classified documents investigation in order to avoid criminal charges. Sources tell the Washington Post Trump lied to his own advisors, claiming the boxes only contained newspaper clippings, and rebuffed repeated attempts by the National Archives to have the documents handed over.
And joining us now to talk about the latest developments in the Trump case and all things politics, the host of the Political Report here on WGN-TV, Paul Lisnek.
Our weekly visit.
Yes. I mean, that last piece of information, substantial. It is shocking, but not surprising. But to think all of this could have been avoided, what do you think a settlement would have looked like?
So I think what Chris Kise, that's the lawyer that had suggested it to Trump, what he had essentially wanted to do was get former President Trump to give the documents back, and then, like everybody else who's been had found to happen, he would talk to DOJ, and probably this would have gone away. I mean, almost assuredly, this would have gone away. So it's another piece of concern when you think about what is Trump's mindset, what was he thinking, because everybody else, it's a mistake, I didn't mean to have him. So here you have a lawyer who said, I said turn them back and I'll fix this for you, and he went, no, I want to keep them, they're mine.
Let's talk a little bit about the judge, Judge Aileen Cannon.
Yeah.
Everybody's been honing in on her, especially since she was a Trump-appointed judge. She's already issued a first order in the case concerning security classification for the lawyers. But what does this give you an idea how she may run this case?
So if you're going to go take that and isolate it, it's all we got right now. Her first request right there, which is they all had to open up their files today, and it's got to be done by the 20th. That's moving this case along. Remember, we've talked about the fact that Florida has a rocket docket and cases move very fast. There are some who believe that Judge Cannon, on behalf of President Trump, will slow things up, will delay things.
But the special counsel wanted it quick,
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Jack Smith wants this thing, moving, but it's not his. It's right. It's Trump's right. And so the bottom line is this decision by Judge Cannon suggests maybe this will be a different situation.
Because she is a Trump appointee, and she'll have a lot of leeway in making decisions in the case along the way. How is that not a win for Trump? Or do you think that kind of unplugs criticism from Trump supporters who say, boy, he got a judge that was on Biden's side?
So first of all, look, every federal judge is appointed by a president, right?
Yeah.
And you'd have lots of defendants saying, wait a minute, I'm a Republican, I don't want a Democrat-appointed judge, vice versa. This is, of course, a little different because the appointer is the one who's in front of her, so that makes it a little strange. But that just kind of comes with the territory. We have to believe judges have the ability to do what's right. And listen, in the course of this, including Judge Cannon getting reversed in the Mar-a-Lago search situation, those were Trump-appointed judges who reversed her. So it's not unusual to see somebody who's appointed but then go the other way because they did what they should do, which is look at the law, look at the facts, and make a ruling.
We talked a little bit about this last week, that Jack Smith filed everything in Florida.
Yeah.
But there's reports that some of the documents were found in Bedminster, New Jersey. Why didn't he do any there as well?
So, Micah, not only documents found, but that's where this sort of infamous tape we've heard about, where Trump is showing people documents and telling them they're not declassified and all of that. Here's the bottom line. There are some who speculate that if Judge Cannon doesn't play well in the sandbox, that Jack Smith is prepared to bring another case.
Kind of holding it in his pocket.
Exactly, keeping it in his back pocket. There's other people who know Jack Smith who say he doesn't work that way. And DOJ doesn't usually play games that way, but it is an option for him. He can go to New Jersey if he chooses to.
Let's talk about Trump's valet, Walt Nauta.
Yeah.
What kind of legal jeopardy is he going to be in for transporting those documents?
Well, he's in significant jeopardy because he facilitated all of this and he lied to the FBI about what he was doing, and they have him on videotape doing all these things. He did not enter a plea because he didn't have, you got to be, in order to be in Florida, you got to have a Florida licensed lawyer. He didn't have one, so he's going to have to.
Why didn't Trump help him out to get one?
Well, Trump legally cannot pay for his defense, so he couldn't do that. But you would think he'd, one way or another, maybe get him a lawyer to be there. He didn't. So now it's June 27th and Nauta goes back. I personally think, and of course they've been ordered by the judge not to talk about the case. I think it's because the prosecution continues to work Walt Nauta, hoping to turn him by saying, you want to spend years and years in prison, or would you rather help us out? We'll see what he does. To date, he has not turned.
The DOJ, the way that it has handled the prosecution, you argue that it tells the critics that there isn't really a two-tier system, as Trump's supporters have said?
Oh, so, well, no, there is a two-tier system, but I think the point that at least ought to be said is that the way in which former President Trump has been treated by the DOJ, you may not agree that he should be indicted, so put that aside for a moment, but he was given no restrictions in his hearing. The government even said, we want no restrictions, Judge. Don't take his passport, don't keep him from traveling, no restrictions on what he could say except with regard to witnesses like a co-defendant, Nauta. So there's really been nothing put on him where if anything, he's been treated more nicely than other defendants. I just kind of point that out. Democrat. It's also, the case is also in a Trump-friendly district, which means likely Trump-friendly jurors.
It's coming up Sunday.
Hey, Sunday's going to be an interesting show. We're going to talk more about this issue. Joining me is going to be a guy named Paul Kendrick. He's the president of a research organization firm called Rust Belt, so it's going to be research-based. Sarah Wetmore is the acting president of Civic Federation, filling in for Lawrence Massal, who tragically died last year. So they're both going to be with me. We're going to talk about that. And midweek, if I can mention this, on my little Tuesday interviews, on Tuesday, I'm going to interview Kevin Knapp. He's the editor of the Washington Blade. We're going to talk about LGBTQ rights and the fact that the community shouldn't be too confident that those rights might not go away. That's 11:45 on Tuesday.
You know what's happening Monday? It is Paul Lisnick Day here in Chicago.
It is in the city,
does
thanks
that
to
mean?
City Council. What means you got to buy me a gift.
Okay.
Or
But
a cake.
but maybe a cake. Somebody make me something. No, I mean, it's an honor from the City Council, which I sure appreciate. Alderman James Kappelman is the one who sponsored that. And so it is nice. I will be on the morning show. Who knows what hijinks they have planned? I don't know.
Oh, no.
But I know I've been asked to be in for the 9 o'clock.
Happy Father's Day.
Thank you.
Right.
And to you.